Hastings on the English coast, 1895. In a grand seaside tournament, the very first world champion of chess sits down with the white pieces, Wilhelm Steinitz. Across from him, a German master of quiet, careful play, Curt von Bardeleben, a man about to walk out of the hall rather than watch the finish. If a quiet game like this is how you'd like to fall asleep, take a moment to subscribe. There's a new one each week. It is an Italian game, one of the oldest openings we know, older than the town it was played in. What people would remember for more than 100 years is a single rook. A rook that steps boldly into the heart of Black's camp and simply stands there. Move after move, it sits where it seems it must be taken. And move after move, every capture leads only to ruin for Black. Steinitz, they said afterward, had already seen the mate many moves deep before it arrived. Von Bardeleben could not bear to play out the end. He rose, left the tournament hall, and never came back to the board. So the champion was left to show the finish alone, to an empty chair. Two masters, a small English seaside town, and one fearless rook. That is the game we'll follow, slowly, all the way to the end. Close your eyes now and let the board take shape in the dark, the pale squares, the dark squares, the pieces waiting in their rows. Let the board take shape in the dark 64 squares, two armies drawn up, and white to move. White opens in the grand old manner, the king's pawn striding out to e4. One square, then another, and the game draws its first breath. That single pawn frees the bishop, frees the queen, and stakes a claim to the center. The board is still wide and open, everything yet to be decided. Black answers as an equal, the pawn to e5. Two pawns stand nose to nose in the middle, and neither means to give ground. The center is claimed and contested from the very first breath. The first knight steps out, whites to f3, pressing softly on the pawn at e5. Calm, familiar beginning, one played 10,000 times before. Black defends without a fuss, the knight to c6. Piece by piece, both armies quietly unfold. Now the bishop takes its aim, sliding out to c4. Down a long pale diagonal, it looks all the way to f7, the one square beside the black king that only the king defends. Remember that square, f7. It will matter more than once. This is the Italian game, old, courtly and sharp beneath its good manners. For centuries, players have met here on these same squares in these same shapes. Black mirrors him, move for move, the bishop to c5. Now each bishop stares at the other's tenderest point, a symmetry as graceful as it is dangerous. For now the two sides are like reflections of one another. White plays a small unhurried pawn move, c3. It seems to do nothing at all, but it is quietly clearing a path, making room for the d-pawn to march up beside its brother. Steinitz builds the way he always did, patiently, one brick upon another. Black develops the king's knight to f6, and now that knight eyes the pawn on e4. A quiet pressure, easy to miss. And here white strikes, the d-pawn thrust to d4, hitting the center with both hands. He is glad to tear the position open, for he is the readier of the two for the fight to come. Black takes up the gauntlet, the e-pawn capturing on d4. White recaptures, the c-pawn taking back on d4. And see what stands in the center now. Two white pawns abreast on d4 and e4, a broad and gleaming wall. Pawns like these can smother an opponent or become targets themselves. Black answers with a sting, the bishop leaps out to b4 and gives check. It reaches in from the flank and the white king cannot look away. White simply interposes, the knight to c3. And here lies a gambit in disguise. The knight blocks the check while quietly daring black to reach out and snatch the e4 pawn. Whether to take it or leave it, that is black's question now. Let the whole picture settle for a moment. White's pawns loom side by side on d4 and e4. His knights stand on c3 and f3, and his bishop is trained from c4 on distant f7. His king still sits at home on e1, soon to be tucked clear of the coming storm. Black has knights on c6 and f6, a bishop pinning from b4, and a second bishop on c5. His king, too, remains uncastled, standing on e8. The whole position leans forward, taut as a drawn bow. And that pawn on e4 sits undefended, glittering there, like bait upon a hook. Black reaches for the center, instead the pawn to d5. It looks natural and strong, striking the bishop on c4 and the pawn on e4 in a single stroke. And yet, seen through a colder, modern eye, this is the first faint stumble. The bolder path was to swallow the bait. The knight from f6, taking on e4. Down that road the game would have shattered into wild complications, and black would have stood fully equal, perhaps even a shade better. The soft-looking d5 instead gives the tension back to white and leaves black a lasting weakness to nurse. White captures at once the e pawn taking on d5. Black recaptures with the knight, settling again on d5. The knight is a fine piece there, planted in the center. Now white brings his king to safety, castling short, the king to g1, the rook swinging across to f1. The king nestles down behind its pawns, and that rook on f1 begins, ever so faintly, to breathe toward f7. Black develops the last bishop out to e6, shoring up the knight on d5. Every black piece is finding a job now, save the king. White's dark bishop glides out to g5, leaning toward the black king's quarter of the board. It eyes the dark squares and presses on black's pieces near his uncastled king. Black offers to trade it away, the bishop dropping back to e7. A sensible offer, swap the pieces and ease the pressure. White opens the exchanges, the bishop on c4 captures the knight on d5. Black takes back with the bishop, recapturing on d5. White's knight springs forward and captures on d5. And the black queen sweeps out to reclaim it, coming to rest on d5. The queen looks powerful there, but a queen in the open can also be chased. In just a few strokes the center has emptied, the smaller pieces falling away one by one. See the board as it stands now, quieter and clearer. White is left with a single pawn on d4, isolated, with no friendly pawn on either side of it. In years to come, men would call this the isolated queen's pawn and argue over it endlessly. It is a weakness, yes, a lonely pawn that must be watched and guarded. But it is also a spearhead, holding key squares and aiming straight into black's half of the board. Such pawns win games and lose games, depending on who commands them. And no player alive understood such a pawn better than the man behind the white pieces. His queen rests on d1, his rooks on a1 and f1. His bishop keeps its post on g5, his knight holds firm on f3, and his king lies snug on g1. Black's queen stands proud and exposed in the very center on d5. His bishop guards on e7, and his rooks still wait, undeveloped, on a8 and h8. Neither black rook has yet joined the game. And his king has not stirred. It stands yet in the middle of the board on e8, with no fortress raised around it. In the quiet after all these trades, that is the one thing out of place. A king in the center, just as the lines are about to open. That single fact is the seed of everything still to come. Watch that king, keep it there in your mind's eye. Already White's bishop on g5 and his rook on f1 are turned, without a sound, toward that undefended king. The pieces are few now, but every one of them is aimed. And it is White to move, with an idea just beginning to form. White's bishop, waiting all this while on g5, now leans in and takes the dark bishop on e7. A trade offered without a sound. The two dark squared bishops leave the board together. Black answers at once. The knight from c6 swings back to e7, retaking. Modern analysis calls both of these the cleanest moves. Nothing lost, nothing hurried. Now White slides the rook from f1 across to e1. It settles on the open file, staring down at the black king, still uncastled on e8. Black shores up the middle, the pawn steps from f7 to f6. A small wall, dimming the long diagonal, giving the king a little breath. White lifts the queen from d1 to e2. Stacked behind the rook now, queen and rook both leaning on that e-file. Black brings the queen a step homeward, from d5 back to d7. Guarding, connecting, keeping watch on e7 and the squares near the king. Let the whole board settle in your mind for a moment. White's king rests easy on g1. The black king still stands in the open middle on e8. White's rook holds e1, the queen beside it on e2, the knight poised on f3. Black's rooks wait in their corners, a8 and h8, the knight on e7, the queen on d7. It looks calm? It is not. That black king has never found a safe home. White brings up the last reserve, the rook from a1 over to c1. Both rooks working now, one on the e-file, one on the c-file, closing the middle in. Black plays the most natural-looking move, the pawn from c7 to c6. Meeting the coming break, questioning White's center. But a colder, modern eye marks this as a small slip. Better was to tuck the king across to f7 first, and only then tend to the center. The pawn move loosens things, and White has been waiting for exactly this. White strikes, the pawn drives forward from d4 to d5. Opening lines through the heart of the board, straight toward that stranded king. Black takes, the c-pawn captures on d5, and now the center lies bare, the files thrown wide open. The knight leaps from f3 into d4. A beautiful square. From d4 it stares at c6, at f5, and above all at e6. Black finally moves the king, stepping from e8 to f7, trying to walk it to safety on the king side, away from the storm. But White is faster. The knight springs from d4 into e6, planted deep in the black position, one square from the king. And it cannot be touched, no pawn can reach it, and it cuts the board in two. Black tries to challenge the invader another way. The rook comes from h8 to c8. Down the c-file, hoping to make a little counter noise. White pays it no mind and swings the queen out to g4. Now queen and knight both point at the king's corner. The threats begin to gather. Black throws up a shield, the pawn from g7 to g6. Blocking one line, but the knight on e6 still sits in the flesh, like a splinter. Hold the picture as it stands now. The black king is exposed on f7, its own pawns scattered loosely around it. f6, g6, h7. White's knight is buried on e6, a single step from the king. The queen glares in from g4. White's rooks command the c-file and the e-file. Black's rooks sit far off on a8 and c8. Everything white owns is aimed at the king. Almost nothing black owns defends it. The combination in this game is remembered for begins right here. The knight jumps back with check from e6 to g5. Check to the king on f70. And notice, from g5 that knight now guards both f7 and h7. Hold on to that. It is the quiet key to everything that follows. The king has to retreat. Back it goes, from f7 to e8. Home again to the very square where all the trouble began. Now the blow. The rook on e1 crashes into e7, taking the knight with check. A rook given up for a knight hurled against the king. And the king dares not take it. For grab that rook, and white's queen sweeps in along the diagonal to d7, and the net closes with knight and queen in a move or two. So the king runs instead. It steps aside from e8 to f8. But the rook does not stop. It stays on the 7th rank and checks again, sliding to f7. And here is the knight's silent work. f7 is covered by the horse on g5. So the king cannot capture the rook. It can only keep walking. It goes from f8 to g8. Into the edge of the corner, still hounded, still fleeing. The rook glides along once more, from f7 to g7 check. And here the king truly cannot take. For if it snatches the rook on g7, the knight springs to e6 with check. Forking the king and the queen on d7, and the queen would fall. So the king edges away instead from g8 to h8. Pressed into the very corner now, with nowhere left to hide. And the last stroke laid before us, the rook takes the pawn on h7 with check. A rook sitting on h7, one square from the king, and still it cannot be captured. The faithful knight on g5 covers h7, just as it covered f7 before. So the king may not take it. It can only crawl back, and the hunt is all but done. Two-hole Rook Steinitz has poured into this attack, and the king stands stripped of every shield. Look at what that single knight on g5 has done. By guarding f7 and h7, it turned the entire 7th rank into a road only white's rook could walk. The rook strolled from e7 to f7 to g7 to h7, checking at every step, and the king could never once touch it. Each pawn around the king swept away, each door of escape quietly shut. This is the combination the game is remembered for. Not one dazzling blow, but a chain, each link forced. And all this while, black's rook sat idle on a8 and c8, a whole world away from their king. That is the lesson folded inside the beauty, a king left in the center, and pieces that never came home to guard it. White needed only to pry the lines open, and then walk the 7th rank to the king's door. See it as it rests now. The black king in the corner on h8, entirely alone. White's rook beside it on h7, the knight watching from g5, the queen waiting on g4. The defense is spent. There is nothing left to hold the position together. From here the end is only a matter of moments, and both players can feel it. The combination has done its work. The game is decided. Let it stay there, just as it is, the quiet corner, the patient knight, the rook on the 7th. A game played long ago, finished now, asking nothing more from us. Let the board go still. Let it rest. And let yourself rest along with it. And there the game rests, finished, the last move never to be unmade. Let the pieces stay where they fell, keeping their small, still shapes in the dark. The board softens now at its edges, the squares loosening, the lines going faint. The kings, the far rook, the quiet pawns, all of it dimming, sinking slowly out of view. There is nothing left to watch for, nothing left to hold. The last of the light on the board fades, and the 64 squares dissolve into shadow. You can let the picture go entirely now. It will keep whole and waiting for whenever you wish to return to it. Sleep well. Good night.